So thanks everybody for joining us today. So native is a really interesting topic, and I think if you ask different folks from industry what does native mean to you, you'd probably get different answers. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk to some experts and get their thoughts on natives. So I think really the big question, at least to kind of get us all grounded, is what sort of native things do you guys work on today, and what does native mean to the companies that you work at? Because like we said, I think everybody's got a slightly different definition. So we'd love to get some ground rules here on native.
Yeah, I think there's no real silver bullet. I do think it means a lot of different things to different people, depending on which side of the buyer-sell side you are. From our perspective, it's realistically an aesthetically rendered piece of content that fits inside the environment where the audience is looking. So,
okay.
Yeah, I think my definition would be that if you squint, it doesn't look like advertising. But I think we do a lot of native experiences, but really they're more branded experiences. So I think that's how we define native for our clients.
Okay.
Yeah, we have native products that we offer to advertisers today. It generally means something that's integrated into the experience or the content of the media which we create. At the same time, the angle that I bring to this panel is, does some of this become programmatic in a way at some point? And the reason I said that is because that's another term that gets confusing. But I think there is some interesting development around assets being served in an automated way and assembled into different formats that fit with content.
I don't have a lot more to add. It's about aesthetically designed advertising that fits within your user experience and your UI, blends into the overall flow, whether it's a stream or content, editorial, and then that's contextually relevant in how it's being served. The combination of the two, which, a targeted ad in the right context relative to the content around it to a certain audience segment creates a native experience.
So to bring it back to mobile a little bit, the unique application of native within mobile, one of the more prevalent formats there is kind of in-feed or in-stream. Would you guys consider those formats to be truly native? Is that how you think about native?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it kind of fits a number of different formats.
Right.
So yeah, we regard it as that. I think one of the things also is we're trying to kind of get people quite enthused about it and not so caught up on actually kind of determining what this is. If it's relevant to my TV advertisers, my other kind of buyers within the digital sphere, then it's all good.
Right. Excellent.
So I would say that InStream was native at one point. I think when Facebook first released it, it was very much native to their environment and sort of met the standards of native. And I think as more and more advertisers have rolled out a similar format, that's actually, at least in my opinion, has been redefined as InStream.
Right.
I think that's right. Again, this is it's always hard when you're trying to get labels and semantics right, especially in this industry. But I think InStream has become a kind of standardized format in many ways. But I don't know if I'd be curious to know if you're writing it on a plan, do you call that InStream or native, for whatever that's worth? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it goes further into what Refining 29 is doing. Native can be about and even magazines. If you go into Forbes or if you go into Fortune now, half of the magazine is sponsored editorial, right? So is that native? It is native to the reader if it's relevant and contextual and feels like they're just reading their magazine. So right. I think Refining 29 is an example of what has become editorial native advertising. And so I think it's more around what is your product and whether or not you're doing an expendable editorial ad or whether it's a auto video ad. ESPN has native content that seems to fit well within their own stream that's different from others. So I think it is evolving. I think the evolution then becomes subject to, can you make a living with non-standardized IAB assets out there and who's buying what, right? So Facebook creating standardization also implies volumes of millions of dollars going into standardized native ad formats that if you're going to want to have fill, CPMs, et cetera, you're going to have to play the game of, well, you can't just be all, let me create my own native ads and then nobody's going to buy into them.
Right.
You have to also play the game of, well, what are standardized ad formats that millions of dollars are going into because they've been recognized to work for the brands and the agencies and the performance of the campaigns. And then, how aggressive can you get around that?
But so as a publisher, do you see native as as a must-have, a must-do for your revenue strategy as a publisher?
So I think we've grown almost, we'll pass 300 million installs this year organically. So we look first at our user experience, and we used to have standard banners, for example, and depending on the areas of the web, our mobile app. And so native, as we redesign and the streams come into play and the experience is different, like we first look at what is our user experience, what allows us to retain our users, the engagement, the value proposition, and then how do we monetize our product. Advertising, is one of our way of monetizing our product. And in that context, then we look at what's the best offering within that environment to support the user experience we want to deliver, and hopefully that matches you having a profitable business over long term. But in today's market, I think the evolution every 2 or 3 years of ad products, ad platforms, and native ads in this regard, as video has become also critical for a lot of people. Like for example, native video ads, for, or interstitial was the holy grail, right? And then there's video ads, the holy grail. But there's a lot of products where, like an Instagram or even in an area like Twitter, like it just doesn't fit very well to have an interstitial, right? So what's the next thing that actually works and flows and streams and interactive experiences? It's not an interstitial anymore. So native ads are actually huge opportunities for a lot of different mobile products.
Right. And so Jeremy Hlavacek at the you did it successfully, confused the panel. So at the Weather Channel, when you look at plans for 2015 and beyond in your ad products, how do you guys think about native that way?
Sorry, no?
In your ad products going forward in 2015 and beyond, how do you think about native?
Native's huge. I mean, we offer, actually at this point we have, I would say, a suite of native products. So we have a branded background product, which is very, I guess, use the word repeatedly, but native to the experience, right? It fits in nicely. It's not intrusive. It's a great way for an advertiser to kind of get a subtle message across to a consumer without necessarily popping a banner in their face. At the same time, we have, at this point, multiple different sizes of InStream units that make a lot of sense and can be, to your point, I think a lot more scalable, which kind of becomes the problem with some of this native work. For us to produce a branded background, there's a lot of work that goes into that, and I think advertisers always want some combination of uniqueness and customization, but they also want scale and they want it to happen quickly. So that's why it becomes such a challenge. So I think we're finding that there's actually a suite of native products that we can offer. And for me, on the programmatic side, I think there's a lot of good momentum towards automating a lot of this, so that advertisers can get the best of both worlds, get that kind of unique integrated experience, but also be able to use all the technology and machines that the people in this room use every day to deliver that at scale.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the things that I've heard from marketers and advertisers is that scale is a challenge in native, in particular in mobile native. So have you guys run into that issue, reaching scale?
I think what's important for us as well is kind of the velocity that mobile's working in. So if it works well in this market as a test solution, how quickly can I roll it out? We're not suffering from people kind of impeding the progress of that. Right. So it's very important for us to test, learn, move on very, very fast, but work with core publishers with the scale that we can start to replicate the successes.
I would agree. I think scale is a real issue, and I think creatively, I think when you're running a campaign and working with a creative agency, anything that's sort of not standard, you get some eye rolls. Do we really need this? So if native's not going to be a core part of your buy, it's going to be viewed as a tack-on, and it's the first thing they're going to cut when they're short on time and working on creative assets.
Right. Actually, the
only other outlier to this is if you're a Snapchat or an Instagram and you have a Salesforce and you have a completely differentiated experience. I mean, they're selling native, right? Intrinsically, these are native campaigns, they're a sponsored campaign. You need a lot of muscle to be able to pull that off with major agencies. And even then, I mean, if you look at Snapchat, I mean, they're shuffling what it is that they're trying to accomplish at scale. And, selling your homepage for $750,000 is very reminiscent of MySpace. Is that really a longevity business model? And so when you look at the tens of thousands of millions of applications out there, they need standardized IABs, they need standardized formats so that there is automation and marketplaces and to be able to then have a really large scale market that is either fragmented or individually large within the individual application.
Yeah, I know OpenRTB version 2.3 was the first version of the spec that allowed for the programmatic placement of native campaigns onto onto native supply through programmatic pipes. So and that's exactly what Jeremy, what you were hitting on, is that maybe one of the solutions to the scale problem is we actually open up the programmatic pipes and we try to accomplish it that way. So.
I think that works as long as you're sensitive enough to keep the creative at the forefront of everything you do. One of the really positive things that we've taken out of native is that it enables us to go back and have a discussion now about planning your content strategy mobile first. So everything from what you're doing video now has to be thought about with this audience in mind. So that's fine. I think, yes, the programmatic world is going to answer the scale issue, but we shouldn't sacrifice creative.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for clients who are running campaigns that are truly custom content elements that aren't so much more news feed oriented, it's really forced marketers to think more like publishers in some ways, right? I think a custom editorial feature about a particular issue or topic that how do you measure the success of something like that? If you're a marketer, you're not used to thinking in terms necessarily of page views and unique users and time and engagement metrics that a web publisher might think of. Have you guys run into that with your clients?
Yeah, so I would say one, I think to me that's the big question about native that I haven't seen anybody really prove out. So I think as consumers we know that they seem less interruptive, more with the flow. We like them. Is the brand impact as great as that full screen interstitial? Probably not. So I think as an industry, we probably have to wrap our heads around that and really understand. So if we want this, why do we want it? So we're making a case to a brand. It's not just about, hey, this is cool, let's do some native. But this format's actually going to advance your business objectives.
Right.
We did a campaign with QuizUp last year. That was a native execution. Actually won a Smarty for best global native execution, which we were proud of. And I think what we did was we actually sort of broke that down into, okay, well, if in a standard rich media unit, we're paying X amount per engagement, now we have this sort of branded content experience, and can we try to back in to a similar metric? Can we say that if we paid this publisher X and people were engaging Y, that would have been a more efficient buy than a more standard unit? So it can be done, but again, those are very custom things that I think agencies really need to think a lot about when they're selling those ideas into clients.
Yeah.
I just add one point too that I wanted to make on the OpenRTB standard and the standardization of all this. I mean, we're talking backstage briefly about things like wearables and devices, right? Like, to me, the platform world is still evolving rapidly, right? And as one of the earlier presentations today talked about what mobile advertising looked like just a few years ago. So I think that's where the automation and the standards become very important, because as certainly as advertisers, you're going to want to be on that next screen, whatever it is, right? Whether it's on your wrist or in your pocket or a tablet or wherever. So having the ability to kind of standardize around a format like that and be able to serve assets into those spaces, I think it's just going to make the whole thing work a lot more seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they've all said it, you need automation, context, and skill. And those are very sparse, today in the market. And then you add to the fact that anybody with scale, maybe not as much as Weather Channel, the app, but most, even Facebook, I mean, there's 70% international. Twitter, right? There is nothing for native on an international market. You may work with Gemini, you may work with Fan. AdMob is barely getting their native off the ground. So it's still a very, scarce demand market, and most of the dollars are going to the big players today, whether it's Twitter, ESPN, Weather, Fan. I would say with working with companies like Gemini, Yahoo's Gemini platform, or even Fan, Fan in particular, there are some interesting caveats there about their ability to target, and so contextual relevance, which then goes back to performance and CTR and whether or not it offsets the interstitial. Right. So data becomes very, very important part. So I would say there has been many, stages of advertising evolution. Like there's a significant investment by everybody in the space to be able to pull off native, so that everybody can make a shitload of money. Right.
And so how would you characterize where PicsArt is today, and kind of like that cycle of investment and testing and proving the model, or do you guys feel like you've gotten to the point where native advertising is a robust and mature part of like the overall mix, or like how?
We're very early, and it's a little bit more complex than it seems. It's like if you have various streams within your own app, when are the calls getting made versus when does a section of your app load? How many scrolls do people have before they get to an ad? So where does the refresh take place? There's actually much more complexity in executing against native and the integrations itself, and in understanding how you fill the fill rate, the exposure rate, and then sharing data back. So I think, we generate millions of dollars with one ad ops person, so we're doing okay. But to be, really deliver what Instagram or others are doing, you need an entire team who's building both on the ad tech product, the ad product, and then the sales of it to really deliver significant value. And that's, relative to where the market is on a dollar standpoint. So we're 6 to 12 months away from, I would say we're 12 months away from being a lot more momentum around the space. And over the next 6 months, you want to be heavily investing to be at the forefront so you can get the first dollars.
Right, because for any publisher who's considering making a move to more native formats, there really is an opportunity cost there. You're giving up other more standard placements that are proven to generate revenue in favor of native placements, and so there is that trade-off.
I would say the behavior of the market kind of answers that question, right? Because I think in some ways, as I'm listening to this discussion, a lot of the native evolution that I think we've seen is probably a reaction from publishers and advertisers saying that, some of these standard units on mobile need to be improved upon, right? And I think that's, at least at Weather, and I think a lot of other publishers, we're making that trade-off, and gladly so in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so from the buy side, do you guys see native as kind of the remedy for some of the downside of the standard formats that exist in mobile today?
No, it should fit part of a strategy, not just a campaign. Nice to have, it's not just there for a CMO to tick the box that he's done that to report back into. So I think that you're quite right. A lot of the ad formats that we have worked really, really well already. They just haven't been given as much probably due care and attention as they should have done. So just by putting yet another solution in place doesn't fix everything that wasn't working at the first point.
Right.
But if you do the math, let's say you have a banner at the bottom of your mobile app, right? And you're getting 20 cents blended average eCPM around the world, and you have, 1 million of those, or 100 million of those. You'll only need 20 million native ads, 300 by 250, to be able to offset that in another part of your application if you integrate native and you've got feeds and everything else and you're getting $2.
Right.
Or whatever that may be. So less ads, better engagement rates, higher eCPM. That's never a bad thing for the consumer, and it's often a good thing for the brand. So it works out over time.
And so from the buy side, what are you guys hearing from clients that are interested in kind of pushing the boundaries of, or pushing their campaigns into mobile native? Like, what's important to them? Are there things that are unique to native that maybe you don't hear against standard placements or standard formats? What are clients telling you about their desire to become more native?
It's a lot more palatable to traditional advertisers, which again is very, very nice.
Right.
So they get the concept of it, they understand how this works. It's not a whole new market or model that they have to understand from the ground up.
Right.
Or feel ashamed to put your hand up and ask questions about it. So it's a very easy adopted new form of advertising.
Cool.
Yeah, to me, I don't see brands pushing for it. Is it going to help their business objectives or not? I think with an app download client, I think one of the reasons that I think you still see a lot of 320 by 50s is because to drive an app download, at least in that space, that's the most effective unit. And that's all they care about. Same thing with an interstitial, maybe to drive a brand engagement. That's all they care about. So I think we can sit up here and talk a lot about InStream ads, but I think if you're a business person, you're trying to drive a certain ROI, I don't think they care about formats, they care about results.
Right. So it's the same campaign results that would drive their investment in any media platform, not just native.
Absolutely.
Right. So, based on, if you were, we'll start on the publisher side. If you guys had some advice for publishers who are thinking about expanding their native plans for this year, what sort of advice do you give to publishers looking to set out on the path of native?
Be true to your product and how you decide to look at the user integration and experience of a native ad and what types of native ad formats. Go with the standard formats. Unless you're Facebook or Twitter and you can create your own standardized format, or you have your sales team, or you're just so big that everybody wants to buy on your platform anyway. Go with where the money is already flowing because it's easier, and then think about how you're going to serve these. There's some complexity around using a mediation platform. Are you integrating independent SDKs? A lot of the native ad companies that are coming out there still are not necessarily all integrated within mediation layers. And so what are you going to do? Who are you going to work with? If you're international, who are the international players? So there's I would say break it down to the fundamentals, like what works well for your user, and then on a, I would say technical standpoint, you really have to think about like how do you simplify execution as much as possible. You simplify it for the buyers, you simplify it operationally, and that allows you to have something that works versus says, oh, we just spent 6 months and we're seeing $1,000.
And do your homework, right? Because there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think there's probably an opportunity today, as Wilson said, to plug into more of this InStream marketplace, right, which has developed pretty aggressively in the last few years. And again, I think you said it well earlier, as a publisher, you should just be looking at the yield off your ad footprint, right? So which units are you placing where? What are they yielding you? And should you be replacing them with something better, right? So that's one side of the equation. And then the second piece, I would say, is to really capture those big brand budgets, those really kind of interesting stuff that the agency side is thinking about. It does need to be unique, right? Because you guys have said specifically that this is sort of maybe on the fringes of the plan a little bit. So it's got to be something special. It's really got to relate to your content. It's got to relate to a particular brand. So I think there's kind of two paths. There's the more standard path where you should absolutely compare to what you're already doing today. And then there's the more creative and unique path where I think you want to map to the advertisers that make sense with your brand.
And then how about on the buy side, for other agencies and advertisers and marketers thinking about embarking on native campaigns, what sort of advice or lessons learned would you guys share?
So I think probably from our point of view, working with the publishers is to partner up, find some, get it when we're blessed with some very innovative brands now that want to share that information and learn the value of that ad unit placement and how that works. What I get quite excited about is when we're now looking at how we can use native in terms of kind of sequential advertising across platforms. So does it work as a performance piece as well as it does a branding piece, and how will that actually start to look across different devices? Cool. So I think just top tips are partner up and work hard at that partnership. One of the things that we suffer from is what we call vendor fatigue, and that's spending a lot of time with a lot of different people and ultimately educating everybody else.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I would say that I think we have some work to do to try to define success and actually see how impactful some of these units are. I actually love what Snapchat did recently with vertical video. Thought that was super interesting. I would sort of consider that a native video format to mobile. And they didn't just say, hey, we did vertical video, it fits the phone better. They backed that up with completion rates, and I think that's what got people excited, sort of the success metrics around the format, not the format itself.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we've got just a few minutes left if there's any questions in the audience.
Yeah, so we did have one question from Logan Lorenz. Said, with scale being a challenge, are you exploring using private marketplaces to increase value and provide exclusivity to native ad products? It's a long one.
I think that's probably a publisher side question. Well, I don't know, I guess it
sounds like it.
could be either one. I mean, generally our view on private marketplaces is we want to use them across as widely as possible across all our programmatic inventory, whether it's a standard unit or native. I do think that one thing I was going to mention that sort of let you off the hook a little bit, Pat, is that in order to make this happen, we need technology partners as well to really buy into all this and make it work for everyone. So that's a key to success. But yeah, I would say for us, private marketplaces are key strategy because it takes all the good things that we know how to do in terms of working directly with marketers and then uses technology to execute it and make it happen.
That sounds like a good answer.
Yeah.
Well, let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you guys very much. Great panel.